Hi, Virgo. Something is already happening right now in the moment you found this and decided to stay with it rather than scrolling past in the ordinary movement through the available content. That fills the visible landscape of a given day without most of it landing in the specific and attention holding way that made you stop here. Rather than continuing the scroll, you stopped. You recognized something in this before you knew what this was going to say, or whether it was going to be the specific thing you did not know you were looking for until the stopping happened and you were here. Reading these words, that stopping is not coincidental, and I want to say that clearly. And specifically, before anything else in this message, because the stopping is itself the beginning of the aligning that the title is promising. Welcome and understand that you are already in it. I want to explain what aligning means. In the specific and honest form of what alignment actually is, rather than in the vague and mystical form that the word sometimes takes when it is used without the grounding that would make it useful, rather than only beautiful. Alignment is not the universe rearranging itself on your behalf in the form of things becoming easier or more favorable or more cooperative with what you want as a result of some cosmic intervention that is responsive to your desire or your deservingness or the specific energy you have been cultivating through particular practices or intentions. Alignment is something simpler and more real and more in your agency than that description suggests. Alignment is the specific state in which who you are and what you do and what you want and where you direct your attention and your energy are all pointing in the same direction simultaneously, rather than in the various and sometimes contradictory directions that most people's energy is distributed across at any given moment, when the alignment between what they are and what they want and what they are doing has not yet been established. When everything is pointing in the same direction, the energy that was previously distributed across multiple competing directions becomes available as focused energy in the singular direction that everything is now pointing toward, and focused energy in a singular direction produces, in proportion to its focus, what diffuse energy in multiple competing directions cannot produce in the same amount of time or with the same quality of result. That is what alignment produces, and that is what the title is promising. After this reading, things start aligning in the real and grounded sense of your energy finding the singular direction, rather than being distributed across the competing ones that have been the dominant configuration of how your energy has been operating in the period that preceded this reading. I want to describe why this specific reading produces the aligning that the title is promising, rather than just any reading or any content that you might have encountered and stopped for, rather than continuing the scroll. Readings of this kind produce alignment, not through any mystical mechanism, but through the specific and practical mechanism of focused attention when you stop scrolling and give full attention to something that is speaking directly to where you actually are in your specific life and your specific situation, rather than where you are supposed to be, or where you were yesterday, or where you might be tomorrow, but where you actually are right now. The specific act of that full and present attention produces something in you that was not present before the attention began. It produces clarity about where you actually are. And clarity about where you actually are is the necessary precondition for alignment, because alignment requires knowing the starting point as accurately as possible before the direction from the starting point can be accurately identified and move toward. Most people, most of the time, do not know their starting point with the accuracy that alignment requires, not because they are unaware or unintelligent, but because the business of ordinary life does not create the conditions under which the starting point can be seen clearly from inside it, rather than from the outside perspective. That clarity about where you are usually requires the reading creates those conditions briefly in the form of a full stop, in the ordinary movement of a day where your full attention is given to something that is speaking specifically to where you are and what is happening there and what it means for what comes next. And in that brief full stop, the clarity arrives. That is the beginning of the aligning that follows. I want to speak about what was happening before the reading in the period that preceded this moment, because the contrast between where you were then and where you are now after the reading is part of what makes the aligning visible as the significant shift it actually is, rather than as something subtle that can be missed. When it arrives without the context of what came before it. Before the reading, your energy was distributed in the particular way. That energy distributes when the clarity about direction is not yet present. In the sharp and grounding form, that produces focus. It was distributed across the things that need attention and the things that feel like they should need attention, and the things that other people's urgency has made feel like they need attention, even when they are not actually the priority, that the person distributing their attention to them would identify as the priority if they had the clarity to choose priorities accurately from their own sense of what matters most, rather than from the ambient pressure of what everything around them is suggesting they should be attending to in the particular moment of any given day. That distribution produced a particular feeling in the preceding period that I think you will recognize if I name it directly. The feeling of being busy without being productive, or present without being fully present, or moving without moving toward anything specific enough to produce the particular satisfaction of having arrived somewhere, rather than only having moved in the vague and general direction of what was hoped for without the focus that would have made the moving more likely to produce an arrival rather than only more movement in the same general and unfocused direction. That feeling is what diffuse energy feels like from the inside, and it is what produces the specific and unnamed longing for something to align that most people carry without always having the word for what they are longing for. But that feels like wanting things to make more sense, or to feel more purposeful, or to produce the sense of moving towards something real, rather than only moving in the manner of someone who is doing things without always being sure that the things being done are the right things, in the right order, in the right direction, for the right reasons. The reading produces that sense in the specific form of, oh, this is what I am about, and where I am, and what matters, and this is the aligning in its first and most essential form, before anything external has changed, and simply because something internal has clarified in the space of a reading that address where you actually are, rather than where you should be, or could be, or used to be, or are planning to be. In the days that follow this reading, in the specific and concrete dimensions of your actual life, rather than in the abstract dimension of an alignment that is somehow easier and more favorable without specific form. In the relational dimension, the aligning looks like the particular ease of connections that have found their correct form and are now operating from that correct form, rather than from the misaligned form. That requires continuous effort to maintain, because what is being maintained is not the natural form of the connection between the people involved, but a managed form that was serving some purpose, and that is now releasing into the more natural and less effortful form that the connection was always moving toward. Some connections will feel easier in the days after this reading, not because the people in them have changed, but because your clarity about where you are and what you need and what you bring to the connection has sharpened in the brief full stop of the reading, and sharpened clarity produces more natural and less effortful engagement in everything it is applied to, including the connections that have been requiring more effort than they naturally should, because the clarity was not yet sharp enough to allow the natural form to emerge in the material dimension. The aligning looks like the particular momentum of someone who is moving in a clear direction, rather than distributing their effort across multiple directions simultaneously without the clarity to commit fully to any one of them, and therefore producing the particular friction of diffuse effort that moves in all directions and therefore gains traction in none. The reading produces the clarity about which direction is the actual direction for you right now in this specific season of your specific life. And with that clarity, the diffuse effort that was distributed across multiple competing directions becomes available for the actual direction. And the momentum that focused effort in a clear direction produces begins to be visible in the days after the reading, as things that were moving slowly or not moving begin to move with the quality of ease that alignment produces when the energy is focused rather than diffuse. And in the internal dimension, the aligning looks like the quiet that follows clarity, the specific settling of internal noise. That clarity produces in someone who has been operating in the absence of a clear enough picture of where they are and what they are doing and what it is in service of, and who has therefore been generating internal noise in the form of the questions and doubts and second guessing. That unclear pictures produce when the mind is trying to navigate from a starting point it cannot see clearly enough to navigate from accurately. The quiet that follows the clarity is not silence in the absence of activity, but the specific and functional quiet of a mind that has found a clear enough picture to navigate from, and that has therefore stopped generating the noise of trying to navigate without the picture and can redirect the energy that was going toward the noise toward the actual navigation, which is quieter and more efficient and produces more in less time than the noisy navigation of someone who does not yet have the clear enough picture to navigate from without the noise. Whew. I want to give you something now that will anchor the aligning in the days after this reading, so that the clarity that the reading produced continues to operate rather than fading back into the diffuse and noisy configuration that was present before the reading, and that will attempt to reassert itself in the ordinary business of the days ahead if it is not actively anchored by something more durable than the reading itself, which is a single event and therefore not fully sufficient on its own to sustain the clarity it produced against the full force of the ordinary that will return after the reading has ended. The anchor is this: in the days after this reading, when the ordinary noise begins to reassert itself, return to the clarity that was present in the reading by asking yourself one question, the simple and direct question of what direction Does everything I am doing right now point toward, and is that direction the actual direction, or is it a dispersal of energy across competing directions that is producing friction rather than momentum? That question returned to regularly in the days after this reading is what sustains the clarity that the reading produced, and therefore sustains the aligning that the clarity enables in the real and concrete dimensions of your relational and material and internal life after the reading has ended and the ordinary has returned with its full complement of demands and competing directions and noise. The question cuts through the noise in the same way the reading did, but in the briefer form of a single question rather than a full reading. That requires the stopping and the giving of full attention that produced the clarity in the first place. After this reading, everything starts aligning, not because the reading is magical, but because the reading produced clarity, and clarity produces alignment in the specific and grounded form of energy that has found its direction and is now moving in it with the particular ease and momentum of focused energy in a clear direction. You stopped, you read, you receive the clarity that the stopping and the reading produced. I want to say something now about what you deserve to feel in the days after this reading, when the aligning is happening, but may not yet be fully visible in the external form of things changing in the concrete and measurable way that most people associate with alignment when they are waiting for it from outside themselves, rather than recognizing it from inside themselves in the form it actually arrives in, which is internal first and external second. You deserve to feel the specific and quiet confidence of someone who has found their direction, even before the direction has produced the full external evidence of its having been found, because the finding precedes the producing always, and the confidence of the finding is available before the producing to the person who has found, even when no one around them can yet see the evidence of what has been found. In the external world, where evidence lives and is visible to others, let yourself feel that confidence. In the days after this reading, before the external evidence arrives, to confirm what you already know internally, which is that the direction is clear and the energy is focused and the aligning is already happening. In the internal form that precedes and enables the external form that will follow in the proportion and at the pace, that focused energy in a clear direction always produces when it is allowed to operate without the diffusion that uncertainty creates, and that the clarity of this reading has temporarily resolved into the focused and directional form that produces the aligning. The title is promising, not after some future event, not when conditions improve or when circumstances become more favorable or when the right moment arrives for the aligning to begin. Now, in the moment after the reading, which is this moment right now, as you are receiving the last words of what this reading has offered you in the specific and complete form of something that found you because you were ready for it. And that is now leaving you with the clarity that is the beginning of everything. Aligning. The aligning has already begun. In the moment you stopped and chose this over the continuing of the scroll, that choice was the first alignment, and everything that follows it is in the same direction, moving from that first aligned moment outward into the days ahead in the expanding and accumulating form of something that was set in motion by a single clear choice that pointed everything else in the same direction. This was the clear choice, and everything is now pointing in the same direction as that choice